apologies to all our witnesses for this delay that we have today. But anyway, okay, now we're ready to move forward. I'm calling meeting number 20 to order. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format, November 25th, 21. Per the Director of the Board of Internal Economy on March 10th, all those attending must wear a mask except for members who are at their place during proceedings. Make a few comments for the benefit of witnesses. Please wait till I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating via Zoom, you have interpretation options, and a reminder that all comments should go through the chair. Before we start with the witnesses, just for the information of the committee, the clerks circulated the travel budget that we were talking about last week, and she was able to do great work and bring it down to under the amount that was required. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So let's go on to our witnesses. All right. From
Madame la Présidente.
Yes.
Madam Chair, as mentioned before, because of all the votes, could we agree that because there are some members that will have to leave before the end, they've shared this with us, can we agree that there won't be any votes on any motions today and that we only hear from the witnesses?
Okay. All those in favor, everybody's good with that? Okay, thank you very much. From the Canola Council of Canada, we have Chris Davidson, Vice President, Stakeholder and Industry Relations. From Pulse Canada, Mac Ross, Director, Market Access and Trade Policy. Cereals Canada, Mark Walker, Vice President, Markets and Trade. Danielle Ramage, Director, Market Access and Trade. Grain Growers of Canada, Aaron Goldrick, Executive Director. And for Justice for All Canada, Tanya Geyer, Executive Director. Welcome to all, and apologies again for the long wait, but we're looking forward to hearing your valuable testimony. Mr. Davidson, would you like to start with a 5-minute presentation?
Great. Thank you very much. Chair Scurll and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to be with you today and to join you with my fellow panelists. As was mentioned, my name is Chris Davison, and I'm the Vice President of Stakeholder and Industry Relations with the Canola Council of Canada. The Canola Council encompasses all links in the canola value chain. Our members include canola growers, life science companies, grain handlers, exporters, processors, and others. Our shared goal is to ensure the industry's continued growth and success, and to do this by meeting global demand for canola and canola-based products, which include food, feed, and fuel. Canola's success is Canada's success. Our industry represents almost $30 billion in economic activity annually, 207,000 jobs, $12 billion in wages, and the largest share of farm cash receipts in the country. Our strategic plan is built on 3 key pillars: sustainable and reliable supply, differentiated value, and stable and open trade. Today, 90% of Canadian canola is consumed in export markets. However, there remains about 40% of the world economy where Canada does not have a free trade agreement, with the result that canola faces tariffs in many of these countries, including in the Indo-Pacific region. We also face non-tariff barriers, or NTBs, which can create unnecessary barriers to Canadian canola exports. At the same time, we see opportunity in a number of the countries in the region, which in part explains our interest in trade negotiations underway, as well as a recent collaboration we undertook with colleagues from Cereals Canada and Pulse Canada to commission a report on agricultural strategy for the Indo-Pacific, with a focus on best practices to address agricultural trade barriers. With this report in mind, I am pleased to be joined today by colleagues from Cereals Canada and Pulse Canada. Together, our 3 value chain organizations represent over $45 billion in economic activity annually and account for over 77% of principal field crop production in Canada. The objectives of our recently completed report were to gain a better understanding of agriculture, trade policy, and market access and market development capacity in the region. We undertook this work with a view to supporting improved approaches to the design and delivery of agriculture, trade policy, and market access and development capacity supporting Canadian trade and agriculture. The study did this by assessing on-the-ground capacity and programming available to Canadian agri-food exporters in the region, examining on-the-ground approaches and programming undertaken by some of our competitors, and assessing gaps, opportunities, and priorities for the improved design and delivery of Canadian government support for agriculture in the region. I will make a few comments about the market dynamics in the region and then turn things over to my colleagues to speak to other aspects of the report. While each of our industries typically identify and prioritize market opportunities based on factors including import demand and product-specific opportunities, the intersection of positive demographic and income growth trends has galvanized agri-food market interest in the Indo-Pacific. However, I can tell you that interest is not limited to Canadian agri-food interests. We have stiff competition in the region with a number of competitors who have had a long-term presence, and our report indicates that the Indo-Pacific is being courted by 70 or more countries. And while the main subregions of the Indo-Pacific are approximately equal in terms of magnitude, we recognize the challenges and opportunities with each are not the same. At the same time, while there's variability in the frequency, coverage, and prevalence of NTBs by country and industry, there's broad recognition of their use in the agricultural sector in Indo-Pacific countries and a keen interest in doing a better job of addressing them from a Canadian agricultural trade, market access, and market development perspective. In this regard, one of the things highlighted in the report is changing market dynamics in the region over the last several years, inclusive of more sustained efforts towards greater self-sufficiency and local value-add opportunities, which have been accompanied by protectionism and use of NTBs to modulate imports, even as free trade agreements transform the landscape. Let me close by saying that as a trade-dependent industry, ensuring stable and open access to markets is a critical success factor to Canadian canola. The Indo-Pacific region includes several markets of interest and importance to us, but also comes with some unique challenges which have encouraged us, together with other agri-food sector colleagues, to think critically and creatively about both industries and government's roles in realizing our market access goals in this region. As it relates to government's role in supporting international market access and providing infrastructure to support markets, we are calling for the creation of an Indo-Pacific Diversification Office that is aligned with the intent of Canada's evolving Indo-Pacific strategy and will be an important catalyst in realizing significant growth potential in agri-food exports. Thank you for your time today, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Ross, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee for having us here today. It's a pleasure to be here alongside colleagues from across the Canadian agriculture value chain to discuss a very important topic for Canada's growing pulse industry. My name is Mac Ross, and I'm the Director of Market Access and Trade Policy with Pulse Canada. Pulse Canada is the national association representing growers, traders, and processors of Canadian pulses, which include dry peas, beans, lentils, and chickpeas. We have the privilege of serving over 25,000 pulse grower members, as well as businesses from every aspect of the value chain. On behalf of our members, we're proudly leading the future of healthy, sustainable food through the growth of Canada's pulse industry. At Pulse Canada, our strategic plan is really centered around finding new markets and new uses for 25% of Canada's pulse production by the year 2025. When given a chance to compete, our industry is a Canadian success story. Canada is the world's largest pulse exporter. Roughly 85% of pulses grown in Canada are exported to some 130 different markets around the world, and our competitiveness in each of these markets is dependent on predictable, rules-based trade. Today, roughly 80% of Canadian lentil and pea exports are exported to Asia, and with the majority of exports concentrated in China and the Indian subcontinent, the Canadian pulse industry has a major opportunity to diversify our exports to other fast-growing markets within the Indo-Pacific region. However, the increasing prevalence of market access issues, mainly in the form of non-tariff barriers, continue to stifle our industry's ability to compete and achieve market growth in the Indo-Pacific. Strengthening market access and trade capabilities in this region is an important step that we can take to help proactively prevent and address increasing market access issues. So from a pulse perspective, we have long-standing and well-documented trade irritants with large pulse importing markets like India. But over the past 5 years, we've also seen other markets within the region increasingly introduce non-tariff barriers that impede trade. These can range from fumigation requirements in Pakistan to unjustified weed seed requirements in Vietnam to abrupt import bans in Sri Lanka and Nepal. And the common feature among all of these issues is that Canada has had no advanced warning. These non-tariff barriers only became apparent once shipments were denied entry at the port or en route at the time of the measure's implementation, leaving both industry and government left reacting. So that's why, in cooperation with our colleagues at the Canola Council and Cereals Canada, we're pleased to bring forward this report that Chris had already mentioned, recommending how our industry can move from reactive reactive to proactive in addressing these issues. Among the report's findings, a deeper presence within the Indo-Pacific with an increased focus on government-to-government engagement, regulatory and technical capacity building, and diplomacy are identified as important areas of opportunity in responding to agricultural market access issues in the region. Our report is clear that the use of non-tariff barriers in the Indo-Pacific region is a prevalent and growing threat to export diversification. So to address this threat, Canada can establish a trade diversification office in the Indo-Pacific and through a trade center of excellence with a full complement of relevant experts in the region to build relationships and solve problems in real time. Not only can Canada better respond to non-tariff barriers, but we can proactively manage issues before they become detrimental to our industry. Canadian Embassy staff currently do a real commendable job, but they're often given many files to manage, and in certain markets they may lack the relevant technical expertise to move such files along. So having in-region expertise with a long-term posting will help build the necessary relationships that are required to manage these difficult trade issues. Our report is clear that our competitors also recognize the importance of a deeper presence in the Indo-Pacific when it comes to addressing these restrictive trade issues, and they're not sitting idly by. The United States, the EU, Australia, and other competitors are investing heavily in resources to grow their respective exports in the region. Our groups are here today not to paint a bleak picture, but to come to the table with an actionable path forward. Our members pride themselves on being part of the solution, and that's why we've invested in the development of a tangible business case for how Canada can not only catch up, but surpass the work being done in the region by our competitors. The cornerstone of this plan is the establishment of an Indo-Pacific Diversification Office, working in lockstep as a key part of the government's Indo-Pacific strategy. Together with the support of government, we are confident that we can seize the tremendous opportunity ahead. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ross. Mr. Walker and Mr. Ramage, please.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for having us here today. My name is Mark Walker. I'm the Vice President of Markets and Trade at CIIT Canada. I'm joined by my colleague, Daniel Ramage, Director of Market Access and Trade Policy, with whom I'll be sharing my time today. CIIT Canada is a national industry association for wheat, durum, barley, and oats in Canada. We represent the full value chain from farmers to crop development companies, grain handlers, and exporters. Our members are focused on the benefits of export-led growth facilitated by access to diverse global markets. Canadian cereals are a staple food exported to every corner of the world, bringing close to $10 billion in export sales to the Canadian economy annually. In the last half-decade, Canadian wheat exports have reached over 80 countries. The Indo-Pacific region encompasses a large and growing share of our export portfolio. Our export opportunities into the Indo-Pacific have followed alongside the region's recent impressive economic and population growth. Over the last 5 years, the Indo-Pacific region has accounted for 46% of Canada's global wheat exports. The prospects for continued growth and diversification are significant. A trade environment that facilitates the production and export of Canadian agriculture is key to strengthening Canada's contributions to global food security in the coming years and building on our competitiveness in the Indo-Pacific region. We believe export successes begin at home with Canadian production of sustainable food. Farmers need access to science-based regulations to support the productivity, reliability, and quality of Canadian exports. Canadian exporters also need trade infrastructure that keeps up with the capacity needed to meet growing export demand. Trade thrives when it is facilitated by a reliable, rules-based trading system. That is why we are strong proponents of Canada's ongoing FTA negotiations across the Indo-Pacific region, particularly with Indonesia, one of Canada's largest wheat import markets. But equal attention and energy must also be dedicated to the aftercare and enforcement of trade agreements. This is needed to secure the full potential of agreements and keep trading partners accountable to their commitments. We can learn from past experiences under the CPTPP and CITA in Vietnam and Italy, where non-tariff barriers have eroded the access for Canadian agriculture following the entry into force of these agreements. To fully leverage our FTAs, Canada must enforce them and lead proactive efforts to resolve and prevent non-tariff barriers.
So, continuing on Mark's points, we believe a proactive and collaborative approach to advancing market access priorities should continue to be embedded in Canada's trade relationships across the Indo-Pacific. And to do this, and to recognize the importance of food security in the coming years, we believe there is a need for agriculture to feature very prominently in the Government of Canada's emerging Indo-Pacific strategy. And Cereals Canada, of course, is united with our colleagues at the Canola Council of Canada and Pulse Canada in calling for government to take action in advancing an Indo-Pacific Diversification Office as a focal point for agriculture within this strategy. The joint study described by my colleagues previously, it emphasizes why an Indo-Pacific Diversification Office represents an opportunity for continued improvement in the way that Canada addresses market access challenges. And these improvements go hand in hand with greater diversification and relationship building needed to maintain and grow our exports across the region. Our study recommends that Canada take action in developing an in-region center of excellence, as we've described, and the development of this office is going to expand Canada's on-the-ground presence and strengthen the government capacity that's needed to be proactive and to prevent and resolve agriculture market access issues. It's also going to support Canada in becoming a more trusted knowledge partner with regulators and stakeholders in the region. And we can do that by embedding personnel with scientific or technical backgrounds and developing that renowned capacity and that renowned center of excellence in the region so that we can better position ourselves to engage when market access issues emerge. The greater technical capacity and trade facilitation assistance that could be mobilized via the type of office that we're describing can also shape the trade environment, and it can improve relationships on the ground across that region. And that's important to support the proactive management of market access issues and risks and deal with risks if they emerge, and preferably before they emerge. For example, in Indonesia, where free trade agreement negotiations are currently taking place, deeper technical engagement would help facilitate a more predictable and transparent trade environment by resolving outstanding technical trade risks and strengthening ties between Canadian and foreign regulators. So Canada's Indo-Pacific strategy does represent an opportunity to mobilize foundational improvements to Canadian market access alongside stronger investments in market development and continued attention on the implementation of free trade agreements. A stronger trade environment is ultimately going to enhance Canada's contributions to food security while unlocking greater diversification opportunities for the benefit of Canadian farmers and exporters while helping us to keep pace with our competitors across that region.
Thank you very much,
thank you.
sir. Sorry to interrupt. Ms. Goldwork, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and committee members, for the invitation to address the committee today on a topic of importance to farmers that our association represents. My name is Erin Gowerluck, and I'm the Executive Director with the Grain Growers of Canada, a national association which represents the interests of about 65,000 grain, pulse, and oilseed farmers in every province across the country. We are fortunate. We grow more food than Canadians can consume. In fact, depending on the commodity, about 80% of the grain we grow is destined for international markets. The agriculture and agri-food industry is a key driver of Canada's economy. It contributes over $142 billion, which is about 6.7% to Canada's GDP annually, and employs about 2.3 million people. As the fifth largest agri-food exporter in the world, trade remains a key engine for growth for our sector and for the Canadian economy. Canadian grain farmers derive their livelihoods from the international marketplace. Simply put, farmers get paid when they deliver their grain to market, and their ability to access international markets has a direct impact on the profitability of Canadian farms. For this reason, farmers have always had their sights set on growth and diversification opportunities. The Indo-Pacific region is a burgeoning market, one which for some commodities already holds significant value, and for others, it's a market with great potential. By way of example, Canadian oats have experienced significant growth in the Japanese market. In the past 10 years, Canada's portion of the Japanese market has increased from as little as 5% to as much as 95%. And oat demand in Japan continues to grow despite the large price increases due to drought conditions in 2021. Canola, as part of this study, appeared before the committee on May 9th, a member of the Grain Growers of Canada, In their remarks, to the committee, they highlighted the potential growth opportunities for canola products in regions like Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Indonesia. This region is also an important market for Canadian wheat, as it purchases about 50% of all Canadian non-durum. China, Indonesia, Japan, Bangladesh were among the largest buyers of the 2020 Canadian wheat crop. And there is potential to grow wheat exports beyond the aforementioned countries into price-sensitive markets like Malaysia, the Philippines, Thailand, Sri Lanka, and South Korea. Canada has exported wheat to these countries in the past, but we are often their last choice as a seller. Stronger trade relations could improve access. But Canada's agriculture sector is facing unprecedented challenges in the international marketplace. Nationalism and protectionism are and will continue to have an impact on our sector for some time to come. According to the Agri-Food Trade Alliance, CAFTA, of which GGC is a member, more than 90 governments around the world recently introduced over 200 import and export restrictions and other measures that have affected trade, including for Canada's agri-food sector. Despite our leading role in global food trade, Canada is not self-sufficient, and it cannot take its own food security for granted. Unfettered and predictable two-way trade and diversity of markets is the best protection against supply shortfalls, natural disasters, diseases, and price shocks. These unprecedented times warrant an unprecedented approach, one which is strategic, comprehensive, and acknowledges the resources as well as the level of commitment that is required to effectively develop a market like the Indo-Pacific region. As such, it is critical for the success of Canada's agriculture sector that the Government of Canada prioritize the development of a comprehensive strategy in one of the most economically important regions in the world. As stated earlier in my remarks and by my colleagues here today, the Indo-Pacific is a burgeoning region, one which holds multiple market opportunities for a variety of Canadian sectors. For some time now, GGC has been calling for the provision of additional resources, like regionally based SWAT teams, we were calling them, consisting of trade officials, technical experts, and industry representatives from all levels and departments within government, designed to work with customers to prevent market access concerns from becoming barriers. We need additional resources stationed abroad to promote Canadian products and ensure continued access. And that is why we support the Grain Value Chain Associations in their recommendation to establish an Indo-Pacific Trade Diversification Office, which would include a dedicated and resourced market access team to work alongside industry partners. This office would be able to maintain regular contact with agriculture policymakers and regulators in the Indo-Pacific, ensuring that Canada is at the leading edge of emerging trends in the region, building professional contacts to facilitate communication with foreign officials when required. I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to present these comments with the committee and invite any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gayer, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Honorable Chair Segro and the members of the Standing Committee on International Trade for this opportunity to share a human rights perspective. As Executive Director of a not-for-profit advocacy organization, Justice for All Canada, focusing on human rights and genocide prevention, my statement deals with CIPA and FIPA as it closely relates to India, a key region of Indo-Pacific. Even though CIPA and FIPA have not yet been signed, Canada should not facilitate investment pathways with India at the expense of human rights and safety of persecuted religious minorities in the country. India is governed by Bharatiya Janata Party, or BJP, a right-wing nationalist group guided by Hindutva ideology that envisions India as a nation for Hindus only, promoting a belief that Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, Dalits, and Adivasis are second-class citizens. Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International have long documented the Indian government's exclusionary framework that gives tacit support to right-wing groups to threaten, attack, discriminate against religious minorities with impunity. 90% of religiously motivated hate crimes between 2009 and 2018 in India occurred since the BJP came to power in 2014. 83% of these attackers were affiliated with right-wing organizations. 62% of the victims were Muslim. 66% of recorded hate crimes were against Dalit minorities in 2019. And in 2021 alone, 305 attacks took place against Christian communities and places of worship. The BJP government has instituted notorious citizenship laws that disproportionately target over 200 Indian Muslims. Citizenship Amendment Act, or CAA, for instance, is a law that protects minorities from several countries surrounding India, but conveniently excludes Muslim refugees. The United Nations described the CAA as fundamentally discriminatory. The reason why we don't hear much about this deteriorating human rights condition in India and the occupied Kashmir is because BJP has repressed, raided, harassed, and shut down over 19,000 NGOs in India and Kashmir since coming to power in 2014, and in particular Amnesty International India, which was shut down last year. Genocide Watch has issued 2 genocide warnings concerning Muslims in India. According to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, India ranks second in its early warning project statistical risk assessment. The United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, or USCIRF, has recently demonstrated the rising threat to Indian minority communities under the BJP government. In December 2021, more recently, during a Hindu religious parliament, prominent Hindutva leaders with close ties to BJP leadership publicly called for genocide against Indian Muslims and other minorities. After these genocide calls took place, state authorities began indiscriminately demolishing properties and homes of Muslims. Recently, a high court in South India's Karnataka state has upheld a discriminatory hijab ban restricting Muslim girls from obtaining an education in the state of Karnataka. India wants to be friends with Canada while it continues working with Russia. The Canadian government has swiftly responded to the Ukrainian crisis while remaining silent over BJP's crimes against humanity. This indicates a strong double standard with regards to implementing CIPA and FIPA. In conclusion, Justice for All Canada recommends the following. The Standing Committee on International Trade is urged to enforce compliance with international conventions on human rights and protection of minorities as a precondition to any economic and trade relations with India. Canada's re-engagement with India on CIPA and FIPA must be contingent on India's commitment to take concrete policy actions to protect its vulnerable minorities. The Standing Committee must ensure that all trade-related conversations and agreements with India involve independent human rights experts and include dedicated human rights chapters and provisions so our bilateral relations are not built at the expense of freedom, justice, and human rights of persecuted minorities in India. We understand that India is a high priority partner for Canada, but the Canadian government must prioritize developing progress agreements that rather promote and protect human rights of vulnerable minorities in Canada. Canada should not overlook India's human rights violations and not treat India as a counterweight to China. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All of that information was very informative. So I need to ask the committee if the committee would like to stay long enough. I know it's beyond our regular time, but given the votes, would you like to stay long enough for each party to have one round?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
That's something that everybody's good with? Okay, terrific. Okay, so we're going to start off with Mr. Hoback.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, witnesses. And again, apologies for the votes and the fiasco that we're going through. And I'm glad you're able to stay here and at least get one round with us and get your message on the record. You mentioned in all your presentations about an Indo-Pacific office to deal with non-tariff trade barriers, I assume. So at this point in time with CPTPP and I know an EU deal, CETA, we are hearing lots of non-tariff trade barriers disputes. Can you give us a few examples of what those disputes would be? Maybe I'll start off with you, Chris, and go to you, Mac, afterwards.
Yeah, happy to give some examples. So typically, they arise from what we, as people know, call sanitary and phytosanitary measures, right? And at their heart, and when done well, they're intended to protect human, animal, and plant health. And they are typically designed and have corollary import requirements related to potential concerns. That could be insects, it could be foodborne pathogens, it could be plant diseases and weeds. And I think what you're hearing from us is when these are overly restrictive or non-scientifically justified, then they become NTBs. And I think we've all got examples of those, but that's the basic category from which they emerge. I would sort of say weed seeds is one that's been quite prevalent across multiple crops recently, depending on the market and country, but that would be a good example.
Mac, just quickly.
Sure, yeah, and you made a good point on how Canada has achieved reduced duties and tariffs through a lot of our free trade agreements, but these non-tariff barriers are becoming the sort of irritant that's restricting trade the most, and we're seeing it. We're seeing it happen in markets throughout the Indo-Pacific, and as Chris mentioned, a lot of times it has to do with phytosanitary and phytosanitary concerns. And what we're proposing with this office is to have a multidisciplinary group to respond to these issues. And a lot of times what our report is exposed is that many of these barriers are often due to the importing country's lack of resources, time, or expertise to implement a risk assessment system for incoming commodities. So a lot of times they could benefit from training and risk-based versus hazard-based regulation. And oftentimes, though, as Chris mentioned too, it could be guised as a technical issue, but there's actual other drivers, whether that be political or to thwart competition and protect domestic producers. So I think it's important to have the appropriate technical personnel, but also a multidisciplinary group that they can understand the key drivers of these issues and deploy the correct response.
Stop you there because I only get 5 minutes, Mac. So I hope you don't mind me being informal. I just wondered then, as we do our new trade agreements, should we be spending more time on the disputing settlement mechanisms for problems such as non-TBs or non-tariff barriers? Maybe Aaron, you want to take a kick at that, or?
Sure, and yes, I think we should, absolutely. We should be dedicating more resources. And we've talked for a long time, I think the value chain associations, along with Grain Growers of Canada, about the need for a policy pivot as it relates to international trade.
But should we put it in actual negotiations up front? Should it, like we're talking about coming in after we get the tariff removals, but should we be looking up front on making sure we've got the appropriate bodies in place to actually deal with the disputes in a relatively timely manner?
I think it's a great question, Mr. Hoback, and I'll turn to my value chain partners maybe to answer that question more specifically, but only to build on some of the responses that they've shared already, to say that, representing Canadian farmers whose livelihood depends on international markets, a level of stability and predictability is what's required at this point, and they're facing an increasing amount now of unpredictability in the international trade environment. So anything we can do to be proactive through this office and to create a more predictable environment is something that we would support. But I would invite my colleagues to speak to some specific examples of where we should be dedicating
quickly, I only
resources.
get so many minutes, so.
Yeah, I can quickly chime in on that, and I think there's two areas. The enforcement of trade agreements is obviously very, very important. We've actually have examples like in Vietnam, where following the introduction and the entry into force of the CPTPP, the grain industry has lost meaningful access to that country. And so that's an example where we need to be doing a better job of engaging and resolving the issues that are preventing us from exporting bulk grain into Vietnam. That's one example. But also at the front end, we can do more in terms of engagement and relationship building to lay a foundation and to lay the groundwork that's going to help us resolve issues proactively and prevent them from emerging in the first place. One example is in Indonesia, where we're currently negotiating a free trade agreement. We have ongoing trade risks that are not currently preventing trade, but those are trade risks that we should be resolving as we negotiate this trade agreement.
Then, as it's fair to say, then you're all in favor of seeing a trade agreement go forward with the Asian group of countries. You all are looking for good results from that. Other than Mr. Taha, you're talking about India a little different than what we're talking about now. So I'll talk to you in another day, probably. So you just want to make sure that we actually get what we negotiate, that we actually get the results that are promised. Is that fair to say? Okay. Your Indo-Pacific trade study. Can you table that with the committee, the entire study itself? Because I think that would be really good to have for our clerks to go through, for sure. And then what are other... 3 seconds? 30 seconds. Quickly, what are other governments doing in that region outside of Canada? What are your competitors from other countries doing in that area, and what's the first mover advantage? 30 seconds, of course.
There's different approaches, but what I will say, generally speaking, we looked primarily at the U.S., the EU, and Australia. As one example, the U.S. in particular has extremely well-resourced presence in the region, both in terms of the personnel that are government-based personnel, but they also have a large number of industry associations that have a significant footprint in the region. And that's just one illustration of what was a recurring theme coming out of the report about the need for more on-the-ground sustained presence in the region. And there are some unique characteristics associated with the Indo-Pacific that we think justify that.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Barani for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to all of the witnesses for some very informative testimony. It's good to see some of you that I've met before. I'm going to start with Mr. Gaillard and just reflect on some of what you mentioned with respect to India. First of all, the testimony was very, very informative and excellent in terms of its content. And just give you a reassurance that in terms of any dealings that we're having with the Indian government, we're going in on an eyes wide open basis. That's the approach that Minister Ng has taken so far with Minister Goyal, her counterpart, and it's an understanding of what is on the table and what the present incarnation of the Indian government represents. I took note of what you said. I know that many members of her caucus, including yours truly, have been vocal as well. I took note of what you said in terms of chapters, and I think about what we've done in terms of inclusive trade recently, and I'm just wondering if you could reflect on it and just elaborate a little bit, because we've taken steps with the renegotiation of the NAFTA 2.0, what we now call CUSMA, because we like putting Canada first, and sort of things like inclusive trade, chapters on gender, chapters on the environment, ensuring that women and Indigenous partners are there as part of the negotiation team. So when you talk about a human rights chapter, what are you envisaging in terms of sort of the next wave of sort of free trade agreements with India or otherwise?
Thank you very much, first of all, for that reassurance, and great to hear that members of caucus and people in the parliament do care about this cause, and we want to hear more of it. Thank you very much for that and the acknowledgement. As far as your question specifically is concerned, we would like to see, just like you have specific provisions around gender, we'd like to see protection of religious minorities more specifically, because that is what seems to be an issue in this case and when it comes to India and many other countries around the world. China is another example. So specifically ethnic minorities, religious minorities, and the protection of those and their human rights essentially being promoted and protected is really what we are concerned about.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gaillard. If I could turn to some of your colleagues, and maybe I'll start with Ms. Garlick from the grain growers. It came up a little bit, but it wasn't focused on too much by most of you as panelists. But just tell me about the context of where we are with Russia and Ukraine and grain and wheat supplies and global food insecurity, and what it means in terms of your the people that you represent here at this committee, and also in terms of sort of there's different sort of optics to it. One, we have to ensure that Canada is playing its part in terms of grain and wheat supply around the planet. Two, there's also concern about not looking predatory in terms of sort of global shortages, not sort of exacerbating or being opportunistic. So can you sort of layer into your testimony a bit of an aspect of the geopolitical situation that we're faced with? Does that present us opportunities, and how do we handle those opportunities in the Asia-Pacific or in the Indo-Pacific with respect to grain in particular?
Sure, I'll offer a brief comment on that, and my colleagues, I'm sure, will have more to add on that. I think from a perspective of Canadian grain farmers, at this point right now, the crop is going in the ground in many parts of the country. It has already. It's underway in other parts of the country. It's really up to Mother Nature at this point, and so we know in parts of Alberta and parts of the prairies that are still recovering from drought conditions last year are lacking the moisture they need, so they're watching their crops very closely. In many parts of Manitoba, for example, that are still underwater, they're just getting that crop in the ground now. So we don't have a lot of insight, I think, at this point in terms of what we can expect harvest will look like, but we're hopeful that Mother Nature will cooperate and will be able to fill any gaps that the international market may be facing, because we know there's a number of food insecure regions around the world that rely on grain from the Black Sea region, and on all other countries will be pulling together to supply what we can for those regions.
And just as some of you guys chime in, so Chris and others, I'd also like your thoughts on, because the pushback that I'm going to get, and I'm going to be candid with you, is that when you say a trade diversification office on the ground, and I heard that from Troy, who's sitting in the back literally just 24 hours ago, so I appreciate the sentiment, I appreciate what you're driving at. Tell me two things. Is there a precedent for that in respect of any other regions in the world where we do business for having a dedicated office that is outside of the normal rubric? And when I'm talking about the normal rubric, I'm talking about our trade commissioner services. So how do we explain that the TCS is good but not quite good enough for this specific role? So how do you differentiate what you're contemplating from the current trade commissioner services that I think most of us would agree generally do a very, very good job?
Maybe I can kick that off. And I would say, first of all, our report reaffirms just what you said. It's very complementary to a number of existing services and programs that are afforded and support exporters from the Canadian government. So I want to be really clear. This is not a criticism. It's about how do we complement and strengthen in that space. What's a little bit unique about this is a recognition that trade commissioner services and other post staff in many instances don't have the technical background and capabilities that we're talking about associated with this office, and they're also tasked with a number of files to deal with that have them looking at sort of exports and promotion from a number of different aspects. This office we're talking about made up of, I'll say, principally three buckets or types of people. We would have technical people, plant science, plant pathology, veterinarians who can work with a number of these sanitary and phytosanitary type measures proactively that I was talking about earlier. We're talking about regulatory experts who can provide that capacity building both on the ground in terms of greater capacity from Canada, but also in terms of working collaboratively to develop greater capacity and support risk-based systems in the Indo-Pacific region, for which there's varying capabilities. And then, of course, agriculture and trade policy personnel, and all of those linked both with staff in the region, but also here in Ottawa and provincially, et cetera, et cetera. So that's how I would sort of build on what you said. This is meant to be a complement to strengthen. I would also say, I think, the region is a little bit, all regions are unique, but some are more aligned or maybe easier for us to work with more remotely or with less of a physical presence. And we heard repeatedly the importance of sustained on-the-ground presence. We need to be in region. And while there's significant opportunity, I want to also stress that the competition in the region is intensifying as well. So this is not just about growth. Growth is what we're after, but we need this to sustain market share that we have today as well.
Thank you very much. On to Monsieur Savard-Tremblay for 6 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to all the witnesses. Apologies again on behalf of the committee. Thank you for being with us. Thank you. We heard similar testimonies. And thank you, Mr. Gayer. We heard about Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. In certain cases, we were hearing of the displacement of indigenous peoples and dangers of forced labor and labor that was not sufficiently regulated. And I imagine with regards to India, you have similar concerns. Do you, and my colleague earlier asked a question on a chapter on human rights, do you believe that there should be a chapter on labor? And if yes, what should be contained in that chapter?
Thank you for that question. So at this point, of course, we do not have sufficient evidence when it comes to labor rights. Of course, there are concerns about labor in many such countries. But when it comes to our concern right now, when it comes to human rights, which is what Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have been pointing out over and over again, has to do with freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom of media, and human freedom to express any critique of the government. So what we're looking for specifically is religious rights and, of course, the right to express yourself and the right to be able to defend any person who is going through human rights violations. So what we would like to see specifically is concerns addressed with regards to human rights defenders, journalists, as well as ethnic minorities and religious minorities.
Donc, on écrirait formellement.
So that could be included in a future free trade agreement. And also, with these human rights violations, we heard of violations by multinational companies, and that an agreement would amplify companies to make those same violations. We heard about palm oil in Indonesia and mines in the Philippines in testimonies that we've heard. And with what you know on India, are there any sectors that we should be more aware of?
Thank you once again for that question. So not specifically at this point that I can think of and that I can talk about when it comes to multinationals. Our concern is really, unfortunately, the lawlessness at this point, and which has tacit approval of the government. So it's not so much the multinationals and the businesses that are involved as much as, of course, unlike China, for instance, and like China and many other countries that you just mentioned, whether it's Indonesia, Thailand, and other places where, multinationals are definitely playing a very significant role, and forced labor is a very serious concern. In this case, this is not something that we are, at least at this point, concerned about, something that we are definitely very closely monitoring, of course. When you have so much lawlessness and so much targeting of people indiscriminately, of course, labor is another aspect of it that we definitely need to be studying, and is something that Canada should be very seriously looking at. And we, as Human Rights Advocacy Group, of course, are also looking into very seriously. Thank you.
Maintenant, comment est-ce qu'on pourrait
And now, how could we bolster the rules for Canadian companies, for example, because we're talking about a trade agreement? So how could we ensure, or how could we bolster rules for Canadian companies that have activities in other countries to ensure that they respect human rights?
I think it comes down to really the whole idea of due diligence, and in some cases we have seen precedents where government has, of course, something around the responsible business ethics, essentially a code, which is something all businesses should follow in Canada when it comes to dealing with India or companies and doing business with India. And of course, at a larger level, we're not necessarily suggesting at this point something like a Special Economic Measures Act or that we have seen with Myanmar or China, for instance. But we're talking about right now more proactive due diligence, which both at the government level we should be doing, and also, of course, the corporations and any company in Canada that is actually doing business with India.
Merci.
Much, Mr. Massey, for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to start with Mr. Guerrero. So I had a chance to go on a Governor General's, it was like a trade mission type of thing. We went to Mexico, Guatemala, and Peru, and I was brought for the border stuff that I do. And then there was also the Mexican component was for the justice system. They were changing their justice system around to be more accountable, and Peru was interesting, and so was Guatemala because of a series of human rights issues that have been going on. What's the balance, I guess, in terms of, this is the interesting component of it, because I think I side more with you is in terms of you need to have better behavior before you even start to engage in some of this as opposed to exploitation. But is there a kind of a tipping point, or is there a structural component? And then I'll go to my guest along here as well, too, to think about this as well, too, is how do we build that into even our offices or extensions of developing relationships as we go ahead? Because usually they're kind of seen as separate. But we are going into trade agreements now that have components like the new NAFTA has it baked inside as opposed to outside the agreement. And that's a big advantage there. So to you first, please, and then I'll go to the other
Thank
question.
you. I mean, actually, what you just mentioned, the examples of the new NAFTA agreements, it is exactly what we have been proposing and promoting and talking about. What we would like to see us and our government do is take this seriously and more proactively. We don't want to be in a situation where, like the situation of Myanmar and Rohingya people. For 5 years, our group, Burma Task Force and Justice for All, was talking about an impending genocide and until it was too late in 2017, and then our government took action. We want to make sure that we are proactive about it, and hence it needs to be embedded, as you said, in those agreements. And that's really what we're looking for at this point. So it needs to be proactive, it needs to be dealt with ahead of time, rather than dealing with and talking about sanctions when it's already too late.
Excellent. And yeah, because you bring the situation in India is really particularly interesting for me because my leader was denied access to India, back in 2013. So I don't know what the state and I got on the early Russian ban list. I think you did too, Madam Chair, and everybody else is on it now. So we're not going there. But maybe to Mr. Davidson, and then across. Like, how do we? So we're moving in this direction. I think that I think that a lot of parties in Parliament are moving towards having that as a component. How do we structurally change that in terms of our offices, our outreach, and building it a little bit more in the process? Because as opposed to having them as part as part of the culture of our outreach and extensions, and is there resistance in business to that? Is there resistance in changing that model a bit? Because I see that as, if we want to do stuff like this, then we have to have it as part of the front service and delivery when we're looking at those advantages to increase trade.
Yeah, I'm happy to kick this off, but welcome comments from my colleagues and want to be careful because I'm not an expert in human rights. But what I would say is a couple of things, and I think we can take a little bit of a lead from what the focus of our report was, even though it was in a different area. And I would mention three things. One, we've already talked about the opportunity to support capacity building. That was one. Second thing is we're very much about promotion and encouragement of adherence to international standards. And the third thing that was uncovered in our report was when it did look at Canada versus our competitors too, is the role that development work does play in this space as well. And the report goes into quite a bit of detail on that. There's different approaches from different countries around the world. But basically it highlighted that we need a multifaceted approach, that there is no silver bullet in our case, and I don't think there is in what you're speaking to as well. And so I think there are some parallels, but I want to be careful about,
That's fair. Anybody else?
Yeah, and I think Chris summed it up well, but it's that there really is an opportunity, and we're exporting food, right? We want to enter these markets to support food security, and so there is a development component just from that very nature. But the opportunity is by linking the work that we're doing when it comes to capacity building in some of these key markets with the priorities that align with Canada's ability to supply some of these key commodities, so that we can help deliver on food security needs. It's about really recognizing that the work that we do in engagement on development, on trade facilitation, capacity building, can have those outcomes.
You don't have any, I know you want to chime in, but real quick, but you don't have any objections to, if we were baking that in the terms of our outreach teams, and if we're going to actually create offices and so forth, is have part of that include human rights in those issues as part of the structure. I mean, that's, I think, would be a departure from the trade missions and stuff that we have now a little bit, but starting to enter in some of that part of the front end of it versus later on discovering later by NGOs and others having to investigate. I guess that's what I want to get out of. I want to get out of investigating from behind as opposed to our frontline service being engaged on this to begin with. So I'll go ahead. Yeah.
And part of the trade missions we're talking about, one of the recommendations we have made to the Canadian government and also the Ministry of International Trade is having and including independent human rights experts and legal experts who actually focus on global human rights. And I think that will be a very welcoming addition.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you to all of our witnesses for the information today. It was actually extremely valuable and well worth the wait from our end anyway. So thank you very much. Thank you to the committee members for your cooperation. I will move adjournment of the meeting. Really should.